Hello, and welcome to the Argyle CFO Summit Strategies for Success. My name is Nick with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. I have some important information to share with you, and then we will turn the floor over to our esteemed opening keynote speaker. First, we would like to take a moment to thank today's sponsor, Lease Accelerator. Our sponsors are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. At any time during today's event, you can visit their virtual booths from the main agenda page, which include complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. We also welcome you to stay socially connected during today's event. For those of you who are active on social media, please use the hashtag ArgyleDigital and follow us at Argyle Exec Forum. Also, be sure to follow Argyle on LinkedIn for special announcements. I would like to take a moment to touch on our content neutrality policy, which we have curated based on the feedback we have received over the years from our members. We have worked closely with our speaking faculty to ensure that you receive a set of balanced and neutral viewpoints during the session today, and we appreciate our members' support of this policy. Finally, and most importantly, we want to hear from you. So during each session, we encourage you to submit your questions and comments in the Q&A box on your screen. Following each presentation, we have set aside time for our speakers to weigh in on your questions. Thanks again for joining us today. Now, let's get started. Without further ado, I would like to introduce George Benaroya, Global CFO, career at Procter & Gamble, Nivea, and now private equity and NYU professor. We are really excited to have George for his opening keynote presentation titled Reducing Operational Costs and Streamlining Finance Processes. Welcome, George. Over to you.
Super. Thanks very much, Nick. I will try to be as precise and good going through this material as you were. So when I attend meetings like this, what I like to do is not just to learn from what the speaker is showing and so on, but also for basically the background that my colleagues, my peers are given. So what I'll do is I will try to give you access to a simple QR code that you can scan, and then I'll be asking questions, and you'll be able to see what all of us in this meeting are thinking about the different questions, the different business questions that we have. So if you will, this is the QR code that you can scan, and you won't be getting college credit for it, so you can skip that question. But then you can go ahead and respond to the first question, which is a fun one, I think. And when you see that, I will then share, the results on how all of us have responded to this QR code question. So regarding the background, like Nick was saying, I started my career at P&G, and now I work in private equity. Now, one of the problems that I have working in private equity is that I am not allowed to talk at all about the stuff that I do, right? My own family doesn't know when I travel, where I'm traveling. Fortunately, now my daughter is working in financial services, and she's aware, and she's able to explain to the rest of my family why when we do M&As and so on, we cannot talk about it. But the workaround that I got is that I teach once per week a class at NYU. That is the highlight of the week for me. And by doing this, I am able to share all the material. In fact, what I do is I show my students the same slides that I use at work, when I manage all these companies. And that is the exact same material that you will see now. So these are all real slides from how we deal with different processes. The other thing that I like to do when I go to events like this one is I want to learn how to do it, right? Based on how companies have actually done it. If you think about it, normally when we hire consultants, they tell us how to do it, but they don't give us, a real walkthrough of how a company actually did it. And that is what I will show you now. So in addition to that quick, bullets about me, the other thing that I have done is I have been to every country in the world, all 193 countries and the 2 territories. And the reason why I do this is that I'm really interested in presenting ideas to clients, but also in seeing how they react to the material that we use or the arguments that we make. And you're most welcome to link, to send me a LinkedIn invitation. I have a network that I like to keep active and so on. And I'll be happy to help you with any career questions or business questions that you have. I think, that having a network is a great idea, right? In terms of the leverage that we can access based on that. So some of you, I see that have already responded to this question. This was a fun question, right? And the question was, at an event like this, what percentage of your time are you spent listening to the speaker, and what percentage of the time are you doing something else, being on Amazon or responding to other emails and so on? And, now I see that at least 2% are more than 90% of the time doing something else. If you look at, the average tends to be something like this, 30 to 60%, with this one about 10%. Now, let me show you some research, and every comment that I always make is backed by research, and I show the the link to where the research is. So we know that on average, people like us are mind wandering 47% of the time. And what is interesting about this, about the fact that we're not listening to the person who is speaking to us, or we're not really paying attention to the page on the book that we're reading, is that when we're doing this, when we're mind wandering, we are less happy. We are unhappy about these other things that we're thinking of. So I'm a very practical person. I figure, it's much better to enjoy the moment, to pay attention. And I'll try to make it very interactive so you guys are able to enjoy the presentation. So the first thing that I would like to talk about is cost inflation. And I will just spend a minute on this one. And the reason why is that this is more of a process or a concept. And then the next two topics are the ones where I would like to build a bit more on. So regarding cost inflation, if you think about it as CFOs, we typically have access to just a portion of the overall purchases, right? Is normally insurance, banking services, but supply chain is typically involved in most purchasing decisions. And what we have been doing over the last 2 years is the same process that I started some 15 years ago. And that is that over the last 2 years, when a supplier sent us a price increase, which was more than reasonable, then we looked into it. If the price increase was reasonable, in line with inflation and so on, we just let it go. But if not, what we did was a deep dive cost analysis. Normally, I look at basically 2 million rows of data in Excel. And the way that I handle this is that I hire interns, summer interns from the University of Michigan, nowadays from NYU, to do the analysis. Based on what the tools that we use, I would say that artificial intelligence is great at gathering data, but the human brain is able or is better at doing the analysis. And so what we do is we find the cost drivers, and then we go to our current supplier and we ask them to lower the cost. Now, if the supplier that we have now, we're happy with it, we do one thing, and if we are not happy with it, we do something else. Regardless, most of the time, what happens when we ask for a cost reduction is that they say that, sorry, it's impossible, and so on. So then what we do is we go to a competitor of that supplier. And look, I'm typically on the other side, right? Typically, I have clients who tell me that they're not giving to us a contract because our competitors is offering a much lower price. So I know how these dynamics work. And these other competitors, they really want to get our business. And I share with them that, people are reluctant to change. And so they're savings must be significant. And then what we do is, once we have that quote, we go back to our current supplier, if we like them, and we ask them to match it. And if we don't like them, if there was, what I heard from my team that we were not satisfied with that supplier, we will simply switch to the other supplier. Now, what is interesting about doing this process is that we have achieved savings of up to 80% by doing this process. 80% was with payroll, with our payroll provider. And, I think it's a process that, while it takes a bit of work, it has worked for us throughout the years, right? And it's a real simple concept to go through. So that is about cost. Now, the second thing is rotation cost. We know now that the total cost in the industry for this is about $1 trillion. And I would like to ask you a question, and you'll be able to see the results. And then you can share your feedback, and I'll show you the results on how everyone has responded. And the question is, at your company, when you are hiring, do candidates take a test where you measure their likelihood to quit? The answer could be yes, if you're aware of sometimes you are not really, knowing all the details of the processes that HR has. So you can go with B or C or even D if that is something that you don't do at your firm. Now, when I saw this slide, I figured that the numbers must be wrong. There is no way that in the US, 50% of people will be changing their jobs per year. So this was a few years ago. I went back and I checked the data, which is from the BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and I saw that it was correct. So what we know is that 1 out of 2 of us, based on these statistics, will be working at a different company a year from now. Now, that varies by type of function. For example, if you look at finance people like us, it's only 26. I always like to say that, people in finance like to stay, like to have clear processes and so on. They're less likely to leave. But 26% is still a huge number. And then some of our colleagues, for example, in the hospitality industry, is 85%. At Amazon, it's been released that for some of the things that they do, they have a rotation of 100% per year. So every year people change. And that is a real high cost that many times we don't think about it. So 1 out of 2 of us will be changing jobs by next year. Now, in this chart, we see that last year, 45 million people quit their jobs. And according to Gallup, the cost of people doing that is $1 trillion. Now, consider this. When I look at that headline, I thought, well, they're probably exaggerating or trying to sell their services, which we buy, by the way. But when I did the math on my head, I said, of course, 45 million people, 1 trillion, that's about $20,000 per head. And I know that the cost can be higher than that. It's not just the cost of hiring someone else, but it's also the productivity. So we have real good information about lost productivity for factories and manufacturing jobs and so on. For white-collar jobs, it's harder. But we did some research about 3 years ago where we looked at the productivity of a CFO and a finance manager and a finance supervisor and other areas. And overall, the loss in productivity is equivalent to about 30% of an annual salary when we replace someone. So when we replace a finance manager, it takes him or her time to learn all our processes and our rules and who makes decisions and so on. So it's a real high cost. Now, this is a chart from Statista, and what this chart is showing is that the big resignation, so to speak, is now only 3.5 million people per month. Now, if you think about it, that's 42 million people a year. So that is still a very, very large number of people. And here is a chart that is really interesting. The chart says that 50% of employees are seeking work elsewhere. So think about that. 1 out of 2 people in our teams are looking for a job somewhere else. Are you aware of that? Is that something that you think? When I look at this chart, I think to myself, that cannot be. But those are the numbers, right? That is what the numbers show. So let's take a look now at the results that we got. I noticed that some people were having trouble, I believe, with the QR code, but based on the numbers that I see, it seems like at least some of you were able to respond. So let me share with you the responses that we have collected. And in this chart, what you guys are saying is that at your company, when you hire candidates, some of you do have a test to try to measure whether the candidates are likely to quit. But in most cases, if you think about it, the tests that you guys have don't include such questions. And I've noticed that it appears that all of you are giving some sort of test. There's no one with response D, that at your company you don't give tests. So this is how we manage the rotation problem. The first thing that we do, and we do this in finance, by the way, is we look at trends over the last, I like to do it over 5 years, right? Sometimes for some markets, I will gather the data for 3 years, but I like to have a lot of data. And then what we try to do is we try to look at what was the reason why that employee quit. Because the problem with HR issues is that typically we hear anecdotal evidence, right? Someone is saying it's because of this or it's because of that. And it's much better when we have data from a lot of data points. So we use this analysis to then, administer tests where we're better able to measure whether, the candidate will quit or not. And then the next 2 steps are done by HR, right? In terms of looking for candidates that, will show in the test that they're likely to stay and the different retention tools and so on. This is what I have learned looking at this data, not only in the US, but in other markets. In general, older people are more likely to stay on a job. This is something that is statistically shown regarding age. It may be because for older people, I will put myself in that case, it's harder to find a job than for people who are much younger. And the other thing that we have found on the data and on the research is that candidates who change jobs in the past very frequently are statistically more likely to change jobs in the future as well. Now, let me go to the third topic, and then I would like to have 6 minutes or so for questions. So this one is about marketing spending. And what I would like to do is I would like to go right ahead and activate the last question. And this question is about, but let me give you the QR code, which is always the same, right? It's about how you, or what was the main reason why you bought a product. And I'll show you the results, which will include the results from like 4,000 respondents. So here are some data that you may find interesting. The first one is that about 1 trillion is spent in advertising, $350 billion in the US, and that in general, these are the different companies that you will have to look at the reason why you bought a product from these companies. And I'll get back, I'll give you a minute to respond. And what we know is that about 10% of revenue on average is spent in advertising or marketing. So just think about your company, think about what 10% of revenue in your company is. And in general, on the average, that is the investment that is being made on marketing. This is also, I think, one slide that is interesting, and this shows that nowadays about 70% of the investment is being made on digital and about 18% on TV. Now, I'm usually told that when we invest on digital, Google and Facebook and so on have excellent tools for us to measure whether the investment was a good ROI or not. And I'm not sure about that. And this is why 75% of CMOs, according to Nielsen, can't quantify the return on investment on their marketing investment. So let me show you the results, because I think this will be interesting. I'll check there whether you guys have are able to see it. So what we see here are the responses on what was the primary reason why you bought a Disney service or product. And when the slides come, you will see that the most important reason was I trust the brand. It was not influencers. So the ratio of I trust the brand is 5 times bigger than influencers. See, there is slight delay on the slide for you. Okay, let me go to the next slide. Trying to make sure that you guys can see the slides. Nick, could you let me know if you're able to see the slides?
Yes, I can see it very clearly.
Okay, good. So with Disney and so on?
Yes.
Okay, super. Yeah. All right. So what we see in the case of Disney is that 32% of you and 4,000 other people, the main reason why you buy a product is that you trust the brand, and in the case of influencers, it's only 6%. Look at Apple, 67% I trust the brand, 7% influencers, and price 1%. Look at Estee Lauder. I trust the brand 13%, not as important as the other ones. The 2 main ones are influencers and recommended by someone I trust. This one is for Nike. I trust the brand 36%, influencers 15%. And this one is for P&G. Here, the most important item was that the product was at the shelves. If it's not, people will buy Colgate or Unilever products. And finally, in the case of McDonald's, is price the main reason at 30%. The influencers are 3%, which makes you wonder then why is it that McDonald's invests $20 million on influencers? So the reason why I wanted to share these results is that there are sometimes decisions that we make which are not related to what the numbers are showing. Okay, I'm back to the PowerPoint. Can you see it, Nick?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. So let me double check on the sharing. How about now?
Yes. Now I see it. Thank you.
Okay. So to summarize all this, what we see is that recommended by someone I trust is 50% more important than influencers, and I trust the brand is 3 times more important as TV commercials. So that is what we do at where I work to try to gather the data and create a proper way to deal with attribution, right? And then we run this process in different test markets to find out whether this works. I find a real good way to have folks help us with this is to hire some interns from schools, different universities in the US. This is an organization that I support that is a non-for-profit. And if you need help with this, interns, which are graduates from NYU or students, you can reach out to them. And now I'll be happy to take any questions that we have. It looks like I have about 4 minutes. I suppose maybe what we could do is, Nick, you could help me out. And if you see any question that many people have, I'll be happy to answer that one.
Sure. I'd be happy to do that. Okay. Here's a question from the audience. Since you have traveled to all countries, how many languages do you speak, read, and write?
So look, English is not my first language. And what I have always done in the companies where I work is I have paid for our employees to be able to have access to English lessons. And the reason why is that, you can use English in any of the 193 countries that I have been to, right? More than any other language. Having said that, at the company where I work, they give us lessons to learn the local language. So I will learn the basics of, say, French. I was in Switzerland for 5 years, or Japan when I lived in Japan, or Turkey when I live in Turkey, and so on. But I still find that I'm not fluent at any of those, but I think that to make the effort to learn the basics of a language to communicate with clients is quite useful. And I use my hands, right? I tell people that I lived for 20 years abroad, and I will get a haircut. I will go and I make designs, right, to be able to communicate, and that I was able to communicate with people even though I wasn't fluent in the local language.
Great.
And I think we have maybe time for another one.
Yeah, I think we have time for one more question. Here we go. Addressing employee reluctance to change is often a significant challenge. What communication and change management strategies do you recommend to navigate this hurdle when implementing automation in finance tasks?
So one of the first, the numbers, right? I always make this comment. First, I want to see the numbers, and then I listen to the story. So over the last 10 years, we in finance have reduced headcount per million or $1 billion by 1/2. Now, what we were able to do when we were automating processes and so on is retrain people to be able to have access to other jobs and so on. So one of the main things I always do is I put myself on the shoes of the other person, right? And I think, if I was her, will I be worried that I'll be losing my job? And if that is the case, I will explain to them, what are the different processes that we have to make sure that they're retrained to get another job. So I think, the loss of a job is one of the main issues. But the other thing that many times my team was reluctant to do was simply because, they figure or they argue, it doesn't work here, right? So I'll be doing something in Germany and they will say, that only works in the US, and vice versa. And so what I will do is I will go and implement these changes, speaking to employees or to clients myself. I will have my photo taken and then I will show it to them. And that was a good way to, enable them or encourage them to take the steps going forward. So net, I think that, one of the principles that I try to use is to be a role model when suggesting to others to make changes.
Well, great. Thank you again, George, for an excellent keynote. And I want to thank everyone else for joining us today. This session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. As a reminder, please be sure to check out the prizes and raffle rules section to see how you can earn points for the chance to win one of several prizes. Our next session will begin at 11:35 a.m. Eastern Time, which will be a panel discussion titled Growth Strategies for 2024 and Beyond. Please click the join button that will appear on your screen to be redirected to the next session, and we look forward to seeing you there.